She looks at me. I have like a teardrop. She's like, "You're crying because of this sign," and I'm like, "Yeah," but at the end, like in my head, I was really crying because I knew at that moment that my life was gonna completely change. I wrote, "Yeah, hi, my name is Frank," and I was a 32-year-old intern.
Hello, Brazil! Hello, world! My name is Marcelo, I'm a creative copywriter here in the US, and in today's episode of Publicitário na Gringa, I'm gonna talk with Frank Garcia, a Panamanian who currently works as senior creative at Gut Miami. Frank is not only an amazing creative, but he also has an incredible story of giving up on a very well-established career as the vice president of marketing of a bank in Panama to come to the US, get back to square zero, and start working as an intern at the age of 32 to finally fulfill his dream of becoming a creative in the US. Chatting with Frank was extremely insightful, extremely inspiring. So if you want to change career, if you want to work abroad, or you just want to know a little bit more about advertising, this video is for you. But well, guess I already talked a lot. Let's hear what Frank has to tell us.
Frank, thank you so much for your time here. Such a pleasure to have you here in the channel. I've been talking with like a lot of people, Brazilians, but then I started talking with Americans, Egyptians, and now I have a Panamanian here to talk with me. And so interested to know a little bit more about your story. So thank you so much for being.
Well, thank you, Marcelo, for having me. Yeah, and I think about the Panamanian thing is there's not a lot of us in advertising outside. I can, outside of Panama. So I can think, on top of my head, the other Panamanian would be Alex Allen that also works with me.
Yeah, and it's good to show like to people from your country that it's possible and like to have someone to look for. So before we jump into your story, and I know from what I've already read about you, that is a really nice story. Can we just talk about the fact that you were a copywriter from Panama, partnering with an art director from Italy in an agency in the US, founded by a Brazilian and an Argentinian. And yesterday I found out that you had an Egyptian intern. So really very extremely multicultural team, multinational team. So for you, what are the benefits and the challenges of having a team that has people from all over the world?
Well, the benefits, I'm just gonna say on top of my head, I think is that whenever you get a brief and you have such a, like a diverse team with like, everyone grew up in a different place, watching something different on TV, listening to different music, listening to different jokes as they walk, like on the streets of their countries. So whenever you get that brief in front of you, you're not gonna get the same answer from every team. Every team is gonna bring something completely different to table. And I love that, how, like different heads solve the same problem in different ways, just based on what we already have inside of our heads. And what we have inside of our heads comes from nurture, like what we learn seeing. So that for me is a huge benefit. If I have to think about, like the cons, even though there's not a con, like I don't really see it as a con. I think that sometimes, like as you're explaining an idea, you have to give a little bit of context because we all believe that, like these insights that we have embedded in our head, everybody knows them. And maybe we're like saying, yeah, like, because I grew up watching, like 90s MTV commercials. And there might be someone in the room that maybe it's, like a little bit younger. And they're like, I don't know this reference. So yeah. I think, like, I think if we always give a little bit of context on the references, on the insights, even when we're doing a case study, because that judge in Italy, or that Korean judge may not be familiar, with like Popeyes and Chick-fil-A's rivalry, So I think working in a diverse team trains you to understand that context is key for everything you do, because sometimes we take for granted and we believe that people are going to understand everything, but they grew up with like maybe a very different upbringing than I did. So
yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So I actually came two situations to my mind. One is when I started working here in the US, and there are so many internal American jokes that people saying like, I totally don't get the reference at first. So like, what are you guys saying? And another time was when I was talking with a friend that is like a bit younger, and I was talking about the time when we had to dial into the internet, and she was, "What's that?"
When did
Like
that
they
happen?
don't
Yeah.
understand, like because so it's very. I guess context is very key on this.
No, I was just saying, like that thing that you said about the American, like jokes. I remember sitting at Droga in a room and, like people's just joking and me just sitting there, not understanding anything, but doing, and in my head, I just like, the hell are they talking about? Like, I don't know these things, but I have to laugh. If not, I'm going to be fired.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I remember, especially like when I started with like American football jokes, like, oh, I'm in third down. Like, what the hell are you talking about? I have
Yeah.
no idea.
No, and I don't follow sports. I mean, like, I'm wearing an LA hat for the Dodgers. I don't even like baseball. I like LA as a city. So, so like when they start talking about, like football or like that happens to me even in Latin America when people start talking about, like soccer, and I'm just like, I play music,
Yeah.
I do skateboarding. That's the closest that I can call a sport.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I guess it's a good parallel. That I mean, when you're in a different country, it's bigger, but that happens in any situation in life, right? People have different experiences, and I guess that's what's beautiful of our industry, to have people from different experiences.
I think that agencies should reflect the population, because the population itself is not 100% American. Like this is a country based on diversity, immigration, and all of these things. So when you're talking to that market, like you're not just talking to people who were born and raised in Texas. You're also talking to, like maybe, I don't know, someone from Salvador who moved to, like to New Orleans, and they're a part of that mass. So I think, like always keeping that in mind, again, context when explaining things, just being very clear of on why we're doing the things we're doing and making those insights extremely clear for people to get them. Even if they don't get the reference, you're explaining it.
Yeah, actually, this is very true. Like, you will hear a lot of English, of course, but I hear so much Spanish, Chinese, Portuguese when you're walking in the US. So yeah, super multicultural.
And that's in New York. Here in Miami, like I remember like the other time, like for New Year's, there were a lot of Americans like that came here, like because of Miami's a warm city and the weather was nice, and I'm guessing they wanted to spend New Year's outdoors.
Yeah.
And at some point, I asked a friend of mine, "Why are there so many Americans in Miami?"
Yes.
She's like, I'm hearing a lot of English, and like it's not something you're really used to, like on the streets of Miami. Even though I've got, of course, we work in English, but
So now entering on your experience, how did you landed a job here in the US? Different from a lot of people that like they just I want to since the beginning to work with creativity. I want to work in advertising. When you decided to work with this, when you decided to come to Miami, you were in a very nice job in a bank in Panama. So what motivated you to leave your job in marketing, come to the US to study advertising? And if I may add another layer, have you considered changing careers but stay in Panama? Or was like, okay, I'm changing careers, I'm also changing country, I want to do the whole package. How was that decision?
I actually love talking about this because it was at the moment, when that was happening inside of my head, I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? I remember I was a VP for HSBC in Panama, huge bank. And one day I just walked into, like the CEO's office, and I told him, hey man, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I want to be a banker. And let me backtrack a little bit. Where does that come from? Talking about MTV again, I grew up watching very stupid, dumb commercials, like from like 90s MTV back in the days when MTV used to actually play music. I grew up, I grew up to that, I grew up listening to a lot of like punk music. And because of punk music, like it had a very dumb sense of humor. So I grew up with that, like very stupid jokes. All of those like Tom Green movies from the 90s, I'm a 90s guy. I was born in 81. So, like the 90s for me were my era. So I grew up to that. And I remember I was just like, I want to do those things, those stupid ads that I used to watch on TV. And suddenly I went to college and I started creative writing. And when I went back home to Panama, in Panama, there's really not that clear division. At least there wasn't at the time of, like copywriter, art director. So when I graduate as a writer, like it was almost like, yeah, but you're a writer, go and write a fiction book, like go and write the next Tom Sawyer, you Huckleberry Finn. And I was just like, wow. And then my dad, who was a banker, was like, why don't you start also applying to the banks? And I'm like, what do you mean applying to banks? Like I wanted to work in advertising. And he was like, yeah, but it's not happening. And I applied to banks, and oddly, a bank hired me with a creative writing degree, but not an advertising agency. And probably that was the best thing that could have ever happened in my life, because if not, I would have stayed in Panama in advertising from day one. So I joined banking. I didn't know anything about banking, so I started questioning everything. And because of questioning everything, I started changing everything little by little. And in like 7 years, I was already a senior VP, very comfortable position, like really good salary. But I hated what I was doing. I mean, like I didn't like it. I was in charge of a lot of branches from the bank, but I didn't like it at all. So I remember my head started, my wheels started spinning. I want to do advertising, I want to do advertising, I want to do advertising. And I started Googling and I found this place called Miami Ad School online. I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this one day, until one day, I went to the office, and that was the day that I told my boss, hey man, I want to go back to that moment when I said marketing, advertising, potato. It's not potato. It's very different. I wanted to do do crazy shit. At some point, I was even the VP of marketing for a bank back home, and I used to be a pain in the ass because I used to talk to the advertising agency, and I was that client who came with ideas. So at that point, I was just like, it makes sense for me to just start from scratch again. And I remember, this is another part of the story, that I quit. And I going back to your question, did I ever try it in Panama? Yes, I did. When I quit banking, I tried doing my own thing, but like freelancing. But I needed to be educated. I needed to learn new things. So I applied to Miami Ad School, and at the same time, I remember I had a girlfriend, and she was like, because I received another offer from Panama to become a VP of marketing for AIG, an insurance company. Mm-hmm. That girlfriend at the time was like, dude, you're old. I was 31. She was like, I know you want to live this hipster dream of, like Helvetica and, like in these things. At the moment I was obsessed with Helvetica. I was like, Helvetica is a great typography. But it's a typeface. But so I remember I applied, I got the job at AIG. I didn't take it. And at the same weekend, I got my letter of acceptance from Miami Ad School. And I told this girl, can you please come with me to Miami Ad School? I want to take a look at what I'm saying no to. And I came, and it was closed. It was on a weekend. We came for the weekend. And outside of the school, there was a sign that said, thou shall not do boring advertising. And dude, at that moment, I just stood in front of the sign. And my ex-girlfriend, like she looks at me. I have like a teardrop. She's like, you're crying because of this sign? And I'm like, yeah, but at the end, like in my head, I was really crying because I knew at that moment that my life was going to completely change.
Yes.
I knew that I'm an only child, like it's me. And at the moment, 2 schnauzers and my parents. And at that moment, I knew, that I was leaving my country, and that I didn't know when I was going to be back, because my life was going to be outside of Panama.
I actually, as you were saying that you were crying, I'm actually getting the chills, especially because like I also changed career, so I was also in marketing, but I mean in a way more comfortable situation than you, because you were already like in the top. I was like a marketing manager like 4 or 5 years, so it was a little bit easier. But like the fact of moving for another country, and like and another thing that you mentioned that is very interesting is like how sometimes people will say to you things that they think they're helping you,
Yeah.
but you're the only person that knows what really matters and what's important for you, right? So sometimes you need to forget what people are saying and like go
Yeah.
with your heart, right?
You know how many times I heard, like you're an idiot, you're doing great in life. I'm like, I'm not. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Like, what
Yes.
does doing great in life means if you're not doing what you love doing? Like that doesn't mean great. For me, money or things like that are nothing but a consequence of doing the work you love.
Yeah,
If you do the
exactly.
work you love, all of those things will come. But the most important thing is happiness. So yeah, man, and throughout my career, even in advertising, I've going back to those voices that tell you, like, no, don't do that, no, don't do that. It always happens, man. So because it happened to us, I met my partner in Miami Art School, Julia. At the moment, we were both. I mean, like I went to Miami Art School as an art director. Because,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember when I was telling my parents I'm going to go back to school, and there were two titles: copywriter and art director. I chose art director just because it had the word director in it.
Looks better for your parents, right? Your
Yeah, so my
son as a
mom was like, well,
director.
yeah, like what does your son does? He directs art. Makes me sound, like some fucking like Guggenheim, like artsy
Yes.
fuck that I'm not. But so yeah, I met Julia, and Julia had a writing background, but she was an art director, and I loved writing, and I was an art director. So I was just like, I think this is gonna work out, because in our partnership throughout our entire career, it's not like I'm the art director, you are the copywriter. Of course, I am the copywriter now. She's the art director, but we I want her to take a look at everything and destroy my copy. And I am very opinionated about the art too. It's just being, like, this sucks, not with those words. Of course, always with like positive, criticism, but very honest, like we think we can do better, like with these things. And
Yeah, that's also very interesting. How like okay, we divide, right?
yeah,
So one person will go to the computer and write, the other will open Photoshop. But when it's creating that
yeah,
before going to the type to the keyboard, there is this exchange that I agree it's very important. Going back a little bit, so you said you received the acceptance letter, you came to the US to see how it was. Can you tell a little bit how was the process of getting accepted and also the process of getting a student visa? How easy or how hard was the whole process?
the acceptance, I remember it was a brief, and they ask you, like to I had to write a couple of like creative pieces, a creative essay, a bunch of different things that explain why I wanted to join school, and I had to like show some references, like of my creative vision or whatever. And I wrote a script, and now I don't even want to read it because because to be
But was
honest,
good enough. Was good
yeah,
enough for the
I
time.
don't know, I don't know. But the thing is, it's funny because you do have the ideas, you just don't know how to write a script,
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
there's a format to writing a script. And sometimes, when you're starting, you're all over the place, and when you look at the thing, you're like, that's a paragraph, that's not a script.
Yes.
So now that simplifies everything. Even like as a writer, when you watch a show, you can easily imagine the script, but before
Yes.
you're like, where do I even start? How do you do those things? So yeah, so for that process of acceptance, like I sent all my submission. I think it took them like a month to get back to me, and I received that letter saying that that I was accepted. And for me, that was the happiest day of my life. Um, so excited about all the possibilities, so nervous about also all the possibilities, because you're like,
Yes.
I have no idea. I'm going to live in
Yeah.
Miami. The Miami I knew, and the school by then was at the beach, and the Miami that Miami Beach that I knew, for me in my head was a very chaotic, like party driven town. I'm just like, I'm gonna go there and I want to focus just like in doing that. Of course, I'm gonna go out and those things too, because I believe those things also help you, to come up with ideas. But I was nervous, to be honest. I was nervous of changing a life. Then I, like you apply for the visa. But the application for that visa is very simple compared to the next visa
Yeah.
application that I
Of
had to
course.
face. I will talk about that one, of course, because you come here and you're like, okay, in your head that you're coming here with one goal, staying. You know, you're gonna take these
Yeah.
classes to build a portfolio to get a job in this country.
Yeah.
How are you gonna do that? I have no idea, but we'll get there, you know, and we did it. so
Yes. Yeah. So when you arrived in the US, what for you was the biggest challenge?
to be honest, I was so excited. I felt like a kid who was in like Disney World for the first time,
Uh-huh.
because for the first time I was just like, okay, um, I'm doing what I love, surrounded by people who love what they do. I remember walking in the hallways of Miami Art School and just people, you know, like discussing ideas, and I was just like, holy fuck, you know, this is amazing. I think the biggest challenge, and this is a mental thing, 100%, was when everybody was introducing themselves and they were like, hey, my name is blah, 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 and I'm 22 years old. And I was just like, I was, and everyone was like, I'm 22, I'm 23, I'm 24. And I'm just like, and I'm 32, you know? And then when you start becoming an intern, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about this the other day. That was just, I wrote, yeah, hi, my name is Frank, and I was a 32-year-old intern. I was older, I was like 10 years older than the juniors, older than mid-levels. I was probably about the age of my, you know, of my ECDs. I'm still older than my ECDs, you know, like I'm younger than Anselmo, I guess. I don't know, Anselmo looks like a very young man, but so you know, like, but that's only a barrier if you allow it to be. Dude, I'm a 16-year-old idiot inside of my head, and I will always be that. So so I will always be that guy. So you know, like, you throughout advertising, you're always gonna have these voices, you know, that tell you, no, you can't do that. Oh my God, no, you know, that idea is too don't do this, don't do this. Sometimes you're gonna be external, sometimes you're gonna be internal. And I think you just have to say fuck, you know, fuck off to those
Exactly.
voices and just keep going. If you have a goal and the goal is just, as long as your goal is ideas, I think you'll be fine. You know, like a lot of people center, you know, like focus on, I want to become a, you know, like an ECD. I think that's the wrong focus. You should focus always on the idea, and the idea is going to do all of that for you. You know,
Yeah.
I want to win a lion. No, that's not tangible. You need to say, I want to come up with an idea. So it's always the idea.
And what I think that you mentioned that for me is key is what you're saying about the importance of ideas versus like, oh, I want a job title and things like, because especially on our industry, the our award-winning idea can come from an intern, can come from a
Yeah.
junior copywriter. So I think it's an industry and it's a job that doesn't have this barriers of like, oh,
No,
you're not a CCO, so you can't have good ideas. It's not how it works. And
no.
whatever you lived before just helps you, right? Even if it was not in
Yeah.
advertising.
And I actually have a very interesting, probably a little bit controversial view about seniority, because sometimes, you know, like when you go to some places, you will hear the, you know, the words, yeah, but they're not senior enough, you know, like they're not senior enough. And in my head, I'm like, dude, let's stop the car here, okay? Why are we talking about experience in an industry in which we're trying every day to do things that haven't been done before? Every time that you come up with an idea that hasn't been done before, there is zero experience about what you're about to do. So, you know, like, I understand experience is important for, you know, like client relationships, understanding how to, you know, like persuade a client into saying yes, you know, like, and those conversations. But, you know, like, I think we need, this industry needs to chill a little bit on, you know, like on a lot of like ego that it has, and just go back to, you know, like having fun, the ideas, you know, like if you're writing a funny script, you know, like make people laugh, you know, like if you're writing, you know, like an emotional script, make people cry. But, you know, like instead of, there's a lot of conversations in this industry that maybe if we could just focus and channel more the energy on the work, that would be amazing.
Hey guys, quick break here. Just to remind you that we have new videos every Monday and Friday. So if you want to come to the US or to any other place around the globe, don't forget to subscribe so you receive a notification every time we have a new video, okay? Well, let's get back to the interview.
You kind of already teased a little bit this next question, but at what point you decided, okay, I want to stay in the US for good after graduation, and which steps you took in order to achieve that? Because of course it's not like, oh, I finished Miami, I have a job, I have a visa.
No,
the whole
it
process.
wasn't like that at all.
So how was that process, and when you decided to start doing all the things that were needed to?
From day one, that before joining Miami Ad School, at the moment that I saw that sign, "Thou shalt not do boring advertising," I may have not accepted it, like verbally, but I knew that I wanted to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think, like that's your goal. And then at that moment, you're like, I'm just gonna keep my eyes and my ears open, like to understand, because to be honest, it's not crazy. A lot of people before me did it. A lot of people after me did it. So a lot of people do it. So it's just like, let me keep my eyes open. And I started seeing there were two dudes, Wesley Taylor and his partner, that were in Miami at school with me. And those guys were winning every single award show. And at that moment, I had 0 awards. And I didn't even know. For me, like winning an award was like, no, you have to be a genius to win an award. Like only geniuses win awards. But I was just like, I want to do that. And then I heard that there was this O1 visa thing.
Yeah.
And because of that, Julia and I started, we realized that we needed awards and we needed publications.
Yeah.
So in order to come up with more than the awards, the publications, like the how to get on, like on Ads of the World and things like this, like because that helps for your visa case. I remember we used to write the subject, the email subject, like for them something catchy for them to take a look at. And that moment was our biggest piece of education in advertising, because we still do that. What's the headline? What's the headline for the idea? What was my email subject as a student? So, like today we still do it. What is the New York Times going to say about this idea? Back then it was just, like what is, fucking Ads of the World, or another page called Hello Creatives, or, like even Creativity Online, how do you get the editor interested in your idea? But that also taught us something very important. If you can't explain your idea in a sentence, your idea has a lot of fat, or it's not clear, or it's not sharp enough. So, for us, that was, that process of getting our visa was the biggest education that we could have ever received, and that was us self-teaching ourselves, like those things.
When we were talking about O1, you need to show to the government that like you're an extraordinary abilities person, but you're still in school in the end. So like you need to show like still without real work. So I think it's a very interesting challenge of that.
It also means that you need to do work that when you're doing that case study, it needs to look real. It needs to look, like if you're gonna do a Nike project, this should look as if Nike did it. And we had a lot of trouble sometimes with that, because like brands were contacting us like, we haven't done this, and we're like, so sorry.
Wow.
and but we were super excited, because we're like, this brand is mad at us. And I remember,
and you're getting relevance, right? Like people are knowing that in some way. It's better that they, in some sort of way, they got to your job. Otherwise, it will just be in your portfolio. No one would be talking about it. It's
at some point
actually great.
I remember like there was this. We did a project like it was like a project to help people with anorexia, and I remember that it was a partnership between a hospital and Canon 3D printers. And we did this project, and we uploaded it to award shows, and we had it on YouTube. And suddenly, the school calls us and they tell us, Frank, Julia, the actual client, the real client, wants you to take it down. And at that moment, we were going to take it down. And I told Julia, unless, she was like, what are you saying unless? I'm like, unless we talk to them. She's like, let's try it. And I'm like, guys, we can surely take it down. But if we take it down, I think we're doing, like something, like, I think you're going to lose an opportunity. They were like, what do you mean? Because our project was the video that spoke about their brand that had the most amount of views. So
wow.
I'm like, yeah, we can take it down. If you wanted, I can take it down. But we convinced them of, what if we just add, below a disclaimer that said, this is student spec work and it's not, like approved or blessed by blah, blah, blah. And they agreed. Because I was just like, I can't take it down. And they called us and they told us, don't take it down. Just add that.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. That's really cool. So then you started all this process of getting publications, getting awards. But how you ended up landing your first job in America?
I graduated a couple of months before Julia because she was in a quarter below me, two
Mm.
quarters below me. And I remember like it's like this is it. I want to start applying for jobs. And my first job, at the moment I didn't know anything about what was the difference between a Droga 5, a White and Kennedy, or even a pharmaceutical ad agency. So I got an offer from a pharmaceutical ad agency. And I remember that the only thing that I used to say about them is like, oh, it's the place where Andy Warhol used to work. Andy Warhol used to work for this agency, blah, blah, blah. So I got an offer from them. And I remember that weekend that I got the offer, I went to the mall and I bought, nice clothing to start on Monday. And then they called me, hey man, we thought you had an O1 visa. What you have is an OPT, so we can't hire you.
Wow.
At the moment, that was my first punch in the face. And I was just like, ouch, that hurts, like in that moment, like, because throughout your career, there's going to be a lot of people punching you and a lot of not just people, but, like life is going to throw a bunch of jabs at you. And sometimes you're going to question that decision you make about quitting everything. You need to forget that and just being, like whatever it is, I'm going to make it. I don't know what the hell it's going to be. I don't know. Actually, I have this here and not on purpose, but Anselmo Ramos always recommend this book. If you guys haven't read
Oh,
this,
The Secret. Yeah, it's
like,
amazing.
I didn't know this back then. I know it now, but back then I was applying those principles. It's just like I'm gonna get that fucking job. I'm gonna get that fucking job, and I remember there were a lot of no's. A lot, no, 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 no. Even when Julia graduated, like a lot of no, 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 no from people. And the main constant was, your book is too weird. 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 I remember talking to Julia and like asking ourselves, our book, people are saying our book is too weird. And she was like, should we tone it down a little bit? I was just like, no, let's make it weirder. And that's how we did. We went all in making it weirder. And we started, like winning awards. And we got our visa. We got our visa, like the freelance visa, the O1 freelance visa, before an agency sponsored. Why? Because it was very smart just to go into an interview. And when they ask you about that, you're applying for a junior position. So, like agencies are not looking to sponsor a junior. Mm-hmm. Mainly because they think juniors do not qualify for it. And lawyers from companies are going to tell you, no, you don't qualify for it, even if you do. So I wanted to not have that conversation by just being like, hey guys, here's my visa. I have it.
Yes.
And then you just transfer it to the agency. That's what we did.
Okay.
Nice. But the funny thing is, like, we received a lot of no's. Everyone in my class started getting jobs, and I was the only one who was not getting them. So, anxiety levels rising, but we didn't give up, man. We could have easily sell out and just change our style of advertising. But instead, I think we were looking at the wrong places. And I'm not saying wrong by saying that these places, there's anything wrong with these places. They were just not right for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By that type of, what they did was not the type of work that I wanted to do. And suddenly, like when we landed, like at Droga, they were like, yeah, we want to hire you. And dude, that was the second happiest day of my life. I remember Julia.
That's amazing.
We went from like not getting any job offers to like in one day get 4 job offers. And wow. I remember like, we were standing at the cafeteria of Saatchi coming out because they offered us work, and we're standing at the cafeteria at the lobby of Saatchi in Saatchi, New York, and we just got a job offer. We're like, oh, this is nice. We're probably gonna go to Saatchi, whatever. And at that moment, Julia goes to the bathroom, and I received an email. When Julia comes back again, watery eyes. She's like, what? And I'm like, I don't think we're taking Saatchi. I mean, like, I love them and everything, but she's like, why? I'm like, because we're taking Droga 5. She's like, what?
That's amazing. Wow.
and that was the beginning of our career. And we've been always very lucky of just being like, from then we understood that life is not about, like going with whatever, the flow brings you. You need to think, I want to do that, like and just channel that energy. And you know, if it makes sense, it's not something crazy. It's not like I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and say, you know, I want to be the next Usain Bolt. I don't know how to run properly, but if you know, if you're aligned, the type of work that you want to do with the type of place you want to be at, you know, and you just very persistence, man. It's just, you know, like bam, bam, bam every day, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a crazy journey, but I've loved every single moment of my career, even the low moments, because those low moments make you a stronger creative. You know, like they build, you know, like build a lot of, you know, like of who you are as a creative and as a person.
Yeah, and what you said is so interesting because I see a lot of people that are starting, like just getting out of school, like hearing a lot of feedback, and of course you need to hear it and adapt. But some feedbacks, if it's not your style, it just doesn't make any sense. What you're saying, like, because sometimes, oh, you need more headlines, but I'm not a headline guy. I don't want
I
to
don't
do
want to do it.
headlines.
Yeah.
I want to do like crazy stuff, and that's why people should hire you. And I'm assuming, and this is the next question, what do you think that convinced Droga to want to hire you too?
I think two things. I think that we were already doing headline driven work, and by headline driven work, I don't mean, you know, like copy with headlines. I mean, you know, like PR driven work. You know, like
Yeah,
we were like, and Mashal could say something like this, because that's, you know, that comes from, you know, like fucking, you know, like Kristen Porter back in the day, like old school, you know, like not old school, but, you know, like for me that was actually new school, you know, like
yeah,
the actual what's the headline, you know, for everything you do. And we were already thinking like that because of the visa. So they were like, you guys are going to be a great fit. And we were not trying to do 360 campaigns. I hate 360 campaigns. You know, uh, for me, I like one-offs. You know, I like one-offs and going all in. If it's on strategy, if it's on brand, you know, just do a bunch of things that always, you know, like hit what the brand stands for, instead of just, you know, like doing an entire campaign of things that nobody's gonna care about. You know,
yeah.
so I like, even if it's a film, it's a one. You go in, you go out. You know, like this is the headline, and everything doing PR driven work. We like things that you're like, oh fuck, I haven't seen that before. You know, like, and even though of course you have to deliver with craft, you have your people who are, you know, like the art director, the writer. You know, like we're not that. We're not those guys. Everything we do needs to have the right art direction and the right words and the right copy. And I love writing, and I love writing comedy. But one thing that drives us crazy is just every day coming up with something that haven't been done before.
And because you're talking always as, and I think this is amazing, but always talking about you and Julia as a team, can you talk a little bit more of like how you guys met and how you decide, okay, this is an amazing match, and if the fact that you two were foreigners had anything to do with this decision or not?
Yeah, I think, you know, Julia and I just clicked right away. I think that was like 9 years ago. We just clicked right away, and we started working. We started hanging out. I think for me, the two things are very important. You know, like I couldn't have a partner that's just my professional partner, because I'm gonna be calling you over the weekend with an idea. You know, because it's easier if you're both at the same bar to be like, hey, what if we do this thing? You know, like, so I loved working with someone that is so close to me in my life. You know, someone that whenever you're stressed, suddenly someone knocks at your house and it's, you know, like your favorite restaurant with your favorite steak. You know, for me, those all of those things are crucial in your career. Always having each other's backs. You know, like life is gonna throw a lot of curveballs. You know, you need someone, you know, both of you to be, you know, like this, back to back. So, and the fact that she was foreign, yes, of course, because even when we were in New York, you know, working at Droga, and we saw Ricardo Casala and Javier Peña doing fucking Google Home of the Whopper, and we sent them a LinkedIn message telling them, guys, we want to work for you. When they were at David, you know, and we ended up here at GOT. If Julia would have been American, maybe she would have had ties, you know, like with her family and things like this. We're like, we can move wherever we want because we're already not from here. So, you know, like we can go just wherever, you know, we're going to be allowed to do. Great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's also like you guys need like to qualify for the same thing. So like you need to continue doing great work so you can continue having like the visas and eventually I don't know whatever comes next.
Yeah.
But
Green cards, visas, all of those things. Yeah. Yeah.
so you guys worked in Droga 5. So you're doing a lot of great work. How the invitation to join? Well, you kind of teased that you sent the email for that, but
Yeah.
how that appeared and what was the? Was there any bureaucracy of transferring or renewing the visa, or
No,
was
that was easy. Yeah, that was easy. That was actually at that time, it was that was our fourth visa because you know we renew
oh
it as we were a droga. So you know, like transferring to God was our fourth one. But the biggest problem wasn't the visa. Not a problem. The biggest challenge here was you're very comfortable in an amazing agency. You already built relationships with this dude called David Droga that we used to bring him proactive ideas. You know, like again, when we told our friends, guys, we're gonna quit Droga to go to this place that has. When we joined God, we were 5 people. You know, so saying that people were like, "You're an idiot," and every time you hear that, you're like, "I'm doing the right thing," because if the decision makes 100% sense, probably is like it's something that there's no challenge in it. Like I like that. I like I like the uncertainty of like going to a new place that at the moment had zero awards, nothing, and it was just
mhm.
a dream. But what a fucking dream to work, with like directly with Anselmo.
One thing that you said, and I think it's interesting, is like for the Brazilian people that are watching us, it might sound weird that like how people was not excited about Guts, because for us was like, oh my god, Anselmo is building another thing. But
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
heard from a lot of people that in the US at first was like, oh, it's just a new agency, we don't know that much about it. So how was this challenge, you think? Like how people saw Guts at first in your
The thing is, like the New York market is, well, you work in New York, it's very, you have, back then, like it was, the game was Droga, Wyden. There were other agencies that always had, like cool names, like even though their names were always, like there was Anomaly, like Mother, those names with like cool, like there was like a mystery surrounding all of those
yeah.
agencies. Like how do you get into a Droga 5? How do you get into a Wyden Kenny and all of these things? But at the moment, we just saw all the work that like they were doing. First of all, from like Dove Beauty Sketches to like Man Boobs, Past the Heinz, like all BK, but especially it was Google Home of the Whopper. That when we watched that, Julia and I were like, holy fuck, I've never seen something like this in my life. I'm like, these guys just did an ad that triggered Google. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then when we started looking at who was doing all of these, we're like, oh shit, it's the same people that did all of these things. And we're like, okay, we're going back to Miami. We're gonna go back to Miami, and and funny enough, one thing led to the other, and we ended up, like joining Anselmo, here. I remember the process of interview. He asked us one question, and we were not trying to sound crazy or cool or anything. This question, what we responded was, like what we actually really felt and believed. He was like, what do you guys want to do? And we told him, we want to present you ideas that could get us fired. And to be honest, we were not trying to impress him or anything. That was just, because I remember we were presenting some ideas before that people told us, no, you can present that. If you present that, you're going to get fired. I'm like, okay, but I love that idea. And I want to be presenting more of these type of things. So if that could get me fired, like, get fired, like, I think we have to be a little bit less scared and just, like go for the things and do it. Like, if you get fired, so what? you're gonna get another fucking job, you know, like, but if you happen to make that idea, that might change your career.
So getting more on like now that you are already like you have like you've already had like 4 different visas in the US, you already like have your career, like you can say, okay, I'm a creative, they're doing great stuff. What do you think in retrospective were the benefits and the challenges of having a previous experience on the client side?
For me, actually, understanding that clients are a business. They are. Even though, you know, we want to win Grand Prix with their, you know, like by coming up with ideas for them. For me, if the idea doesn't really do anything for the business, for the client, generates a lot of PR, but it doesn't really, you know, like moves the needle, you know, like, what are we doing? Is that advertising or is that just art? Because at the end of the day, for me, advertising, you know, needs to drive results. And results do not necessarily need to mean, hopefully it's sales, but it depends on what's the objective of the campaign. So we love doing ideas that actually, you know, like drive sales. For example, the Popeye's chicken sandwich.
Yeah, I was just gonna reference that.
That drove sales. The sales, yeah.
Thinking, of course, in the mid long term, if in case you leave the US, do you see yourself going back to Panama or exploring different countries?
I'm cool with exploring different countries, but I cannot lie, dude. I have this dream of one day going back to my country and starting my own shop. Mm-hmm. But starting my own shop with, and not just let's do Panamanian advertising. No, I mean, like Panama for me, it's a country that, you know, like geographically, it's in the center of all Latin America. We have the Panama Canal that connects the entire fucking world. You know, like it's a dollarized economy. We have every single big, you know, like company that you have in the world. You know, lots of them actually have, you know, offices in Panama. Like they're actually, like they sit in Panama.
I was gonna say that, yes.
For Latin America, you know, a lot of, you know, like you have like Procter and Gamble and things like that. They're based in Panama for all Latin America. So whenever I go, you know, there, years down the line, I wanna attack those companies, and I want to do, you know, award-winning work coming out from my country, and the same, you know, the same goal. You know, it's like we need to generate headlines, and by headlines, I'm not only talking about, you know, like the local newspapers, but I'm talking about, you know, like great ideas. For example, you know, like the Palau project, you know, like that generated world headlines. Yeah. So, you know, I don't think whatever you're sitting needs to, you know, like bring down the, you know, like the size of your ambition. You know?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. That's such a good idea and insight that I'm surprised that no one has done yet. Because I used to work for P&G and I used to work on the Panama headquarters.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, yeah.
Costa del Este.
Yes, yes. And it was, I mean, at the same time, we used to work with agencies from Mexico, from Brazil, and like P&G is like a huge opportunity for any agency. Like a lot of amazing, like Old Spice, Gillette, like there's so many opportunities on that.
Yeah, and you know, like the moment that I do that, I want to do that exactly mimicking, you know, like what's been done here. I want, you know, like Miami Art School interns, you know, like all of those things, how you build an agency, you know. And a lot of people back home are just, you know, like Festival Caribe de Publicidad. No, dude. Yes, but Lions, you know, let's talk Cannes, let's talk, you know, Clio, let's talk Wancho, you know, let's talk DNAD, you know, like, because, you know, Panama is a great country, and yeah, we're small, but, you know, I think we can dream big.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think like nowadays we can see a lot of, like it's even easier like to make relevance because of like everything being connected, and like it's one thing that hits the internet that becomes the new meme, and bam, like you're already super relevant on that.
And dude, Panama is closer to Miami than New York. So if a client, you know, like clients are everywhere, you know, so even, you know, like clients here in the US, you know, like you can totally target them, you know, from an agency in Panama that just 2 hours and 20 minutes away from Miami. It's the flight is nothing. So.
And because we were already talking about Panama, what you miss most from your home country?
My family, the food. Even though the food here in Miami, it's like I eat Cuban food a lot, and Cuban food is very similar to mine. But I miss like Panamanian breakfast. There's a thing called carimañolas that was like yuca outside, and it had steak inside. That was amazing. I miss my drum set because I play guitar. I play guitar, but I play drums too. So, and I guess I'm not gonna have a drum set in the US until I'm an ECD or something like that, because you need a big house. So I guess that's why I want to become an ECD someday, to be able to have a drum set.
If I was gonna answer the next question, I would say just listen to this whole interview, okay? But what's your advice for people who want to work abroad?
Trust yourself. And whenever you have you're gonna have, life is always gonna give you two choices. Always choose the one that scares the fuck out of you. Like if it doesn't scare you, you shouldn't do it. And also, sometimes, life is gonna throw a lot of things at you. Don't take them if they don't feel right. Like you know in your head, at the moment that I had to explain people, yeah, it's the agency where Andy Warhol used to work at. The fact that I'm explaining anyone means that I'm trying to convince myself that was the right thing for me. That was not the right thing for me. Whatever you're doing, like even if it's, again, people are gonna call you an idiot for doing that. You need to do things that when you say them with pride. Like I work at blank. And that's not necessarily even the name of the agency. That's just the something that makes you proud. So again, it's like for people who are outside of the US and they want to work abroad, it's find what your dreams are, because sometimes we tend to engage with other people's dreams. There's a lot of people saying, I want to work for White and Kennedy, but if you ask them why, they don't know why. So try to find what's your dream, and go for that. Because maybe your dream is not being a droga at God, at Wyden. Maybe your dream, maybe you do want to become the best, pharmaceutical copywriter in the face of earth. And if that's your dream, that's the dream you should be following, not anyone else's dream.
Yeah. And I think that ties back to like the very beginning of what we were talking, that like definitely your family and your ex-girlfriend, they were not saying that because they didn't want you to be happy,
No.
but because what they thought was happiness is totally different than yours. It's so individual, right?
No, I agree with you. It's like they're trying to do the best, but based on on what they understand.
Yeah.
And remember what I was telling you about the thing about context, and all you have to say is like, guys, but happiness for me is blank, and then they're gonna be like, oh, I get
exactly.
it. Even if they don't share it. But my family has always been, I couldn't have been able to do any of this if it weren't because of my mom and dad. Those guys are the, like my biggest supporters always. My best friends and biggest supporters.
Frank, thank you so much for this talk. It was like very inspiring. A lot of things that you say, like I couldn't relate more to everything that you're saying. So grateful that we were able to talk, and
likewise, bro.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Frank again for such an inspiring talk. It was really great for me, and I hope it was for you guys too. And if you want to see more interviews, don't forget to subscribe by hitting the ball on this side. And if you already want to binge watch all the interviews that we've done so far, just click on the card right here. See ya!